Got it.
It just pops over and then we're rocking. All right. Welcome, everyone. My name is Trapper Goldsmith, host of the TeeRap Show, where we showcase elite athletes and sport individuals with their inspiring stories and rise to glory in their pursuit of everlasting greatness. Today, I'm excited to have this guest. I have an immense amount of respect for JARET. He's a Memorial Cup winner, which gets thrown around here almost like an inside joke. But he's also a professional hockey to professional business. He did not become a millionaire as a professional athlete, but he did become a millionaire in business after sport. JARET has built with his incredible wife, Melissa, and continues to build one of the biggest financial agencies in North America. And I'm excited to learn from him how you can play pro sport in business, the tools he got from hockey that have allowed him to succeed in business and life after sport. So listen in. He's an athlete, an entrepreneur, a father, a husband, and we're going to talk about the difference between the WHL and the NHL, why business can fulfill that void we sometimes have as an athlete, and the skills you need to go pro in sports and business. So JARET, welcome, man.
Well, thanks for having me, Trapper. Good to see you as always.
Absolutely. So, man, let's just talk about kind of like where did it start? When did you know that you were a better than average hockey player and this was actually going to go somewhere?
Well, that's really interesting because creating awareness was one thing I've never been strong at. Like, sometimes you just can't see the forest through all the trees. You don't really know where you're at, which I think was probably the biggest hole. I didn't have great perspective as to where things were at. But I would say when I moved from small town Saskatchewan to the city, my game was able to be elevated because there was more options. And I made some teams that as an underage player, and there's only one or two of those players that do that. So at that point in time, it started to dawn on me a little bit, but still had like zero perspective in regards to where I sat or skill level.
So that can actually go both ways, hey? Because I had Aaron Volpatti, who played in the NHL, on the show as well, and he talked about growing up in Revelstoke. And if it wasn't for being in a small town, kind of and playing hockey in a small town, he never would have got exposure because he was a very average player coming up. He would have never got the kind of exposure he did and moving on. Where you're talking about, because you went to a bigger center, you actually got exposed to more and higher competition that allowed you to succeed.
Yeah. I mean, I think maybe it was a good time for me to transition when I was 13. I was from a small town. You get lots of ice time, build your confidence up. During those years where they're formative years, really, when it comes to a guy's self-confidence, it's good to get your tires pumped along the way. But you get a certain point where you kind of max out. And this is at that age, maybe where ego starts to take over skill set and you're too big for your britches. So you get into a bigger center, right, where you get exposure. Bigger fishbowl allows you to then continue to stretch and to grow. So now you're playing, instead of being the best player on the team, you're on the other half, and you're going to get better as a byproduct of being surrounded with those guys that are better than you. So I think you need that along the way, right? And that's what the bigger center provided.
Did you play any other sports growing up? Just hockey?
Rugby actually was my only other sport. Several years playing rugby, and there's a lot of transferable skills. More so hockey to rugby than it was from football to rugby, from my understanding. But that was this. It was not even a sport. That's more of a culture. Rugby, really great. Like, if guys like playing hockey because of the team atmosphere, that environment, they're going to love rugby because it's that tenfold. It really is.
They're a different breed, the guys that play rugby, man. That's So what was the love about hockey? Like, what allowed kind of like what piqued your interest? Was it just your skill level? You were better at hockey, or what really made you pursue that sport?
Well, small town Saskatchewan, it was the only sport. And Like literally, there was no rugby teams or football teams or volleyball teams, or I think we had baseball for a couple months, swatting balls and mosquitoes. That was it for a couple months in the summertime, and then it was back to hockey. I would literally skate to my rink down my road because the roads are just packed with ice, packed with snow, and I'd put my skates on. I'd skate to the rink and walk in and then go to practice. Right. So it wasn't much of a love. It was just a this is what people did. Right.
Right. The only option. So I'm gonna do that.
Yeah, and grew up in the 80s where I wasn't too far. Edmonton was the closest big city, and Oilers never lost. So we just watched the Oilers and played hockey. Right. That was it.
The good days. All right. So we fast forward a little bit. You won a Memorial Cup in 97, but you got drafted into the Dub. Was it in 93?
Maybe.
So talk about, you'd been in the league for a while. What was that feeling like finally winning a championship? I mean, that's the biggest trophy you can win in the WHL. It's a big deal.
Well, that was an interesting story because the WHL didn't go according to plan. I ended up getting cut in the year I was 16. I got traded the year I was 17. I decided to go back and play junior because I just wasn't loving the game anymore. And there just ends up being some pressure. And when you're a teenager, you're dealing with everything at that stage of the game. Although you have no real responsibilities, you think the world's on your shoulders sometimes. I wasn't loving the game anymore, so I went back and played junior for a bit, decided to go to university, and then I ended up getting picked up as a free agent from the team now called Gatineau out in the Quebec Major Junior League that was hosting the Memorial Cup that year. And I told them when they called me up, they said, "Hey, we're looking for a defenseman. We know you're over at Ottawa, you going to university. We want you to come across the river and play for us." And I said no. So I called my old man. I told him it was, these guys, they called me up. We're hosting Mem Cup this year, but I just wasn't feeling it. Just because I was a bit jaded, maybe, again, no perspective, I'm bad at that. I just don't see the forest through all the trees. And I could tell on the other end of the line when I told my dad I said no to him, I felt his heart sink, and then mine followed right after. Right. And then thankfully they called back the next day, sweetened the deal a little bit for me. And then I signed up and joined them at the start of the year. Yeah.
And ended up being the winning team.
Ended up being the winning team. Yeah, it was. I even tried out in the Western League prior to that, and they were looking at rebuilding their team. I was an older D-man. That was the Calgary Hitmen. Because I decided, well, do I go to university or do give the Dub another shot? They ended up cutting me. I'm like, oh, that's a sign. So I went to university. And because they're looking to have a bunch of young guys on the team that they wanted to build up over the next 3 years, and I wasn't part of that. So it's just fortunate set of circumstances. You just gotta roll with it, right? We're not smart enough to know what is in store for us, right? When we say yes or no or go somewhere or do something, and it just worked out really well. And that team was an amazing team. Claude Julien, great coach, obviously had a great NHL career as well, and put together a team that was half English and half French, and it's very divided. We just, culturally and socially, we just never really crossed over, but we all respected each other and came together as a team throughout the year. And I think we went through the longest undefeated streak in the Canadian Hockey League history, and that held up for a lot of years. And I forget, it was a few years back that streak was I think it was 31, with 31 games without a loss. A couple ties in there, but 31 games without a loss.
Wow.
So it was a great squad to be a part of.
So there's a lot of buzz around the NHL right now with Connor Bedard entering the draft this year, and what NHL team is going to pick him up. How important is it for a player, Jaret, to play well during those specific years, like from 15 to 20, I believe, right, is the limit to the WHL? Like, yeah. Is that your window? Is that your window to make it in?
It's, to me, I believe it's not the time when you're playing, it's the time when you're not playing, right? When you're 15, 16, 17 and summertime rolls around and the weather gets warm, like it's your ability to focus on a few things that matter. I'm not saying you can't have any fun. I'm saying that there has to be a program in place that's going to give you the edge now more than ever. you're going to have to get a program that's going to give you the edge when it comes to your physical fitness, right? And focusing on the game. There was a summer or two in there that I really didn't do a whole heck of a lot when it came to hockey, or even training for hockey. I'm not saying you have to be on the ice, but training for it.
Yeah.
There was no fitness program that was in place for me that was going to, build certain core strengths as it relates to hockey. And you just get distracted. So I think going from year to year, it's when nobody's watching is when you got to put in the work, right?
You get a little bit of teenager brain, right?
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
What do you think has changed between the game then and the game now? Like, what are some big differences you see in that caliber of hockey?
I don't know these guys and their training schedule, but I don't think that they are they're taking a lot of teenager brain into consideration. Like they're just working through it.
Yeah.
And you don't have a lot of time off if you want to make the show. The competition's never been more fierce, and the training has been much more specific. You see how McDavid moves the puck and moves his feet and uses his edges, and what's being trained now was really not part of the training before. So things change, things advance, and the game is just that much faster than it was before. You go watch some of those games, NHL games from those rewinds, you watch the games from the 80s and you watch how those guys are skating and shooting, and it looks, they're best at that time. And it's not just equipment, but then it also looks like they're like midget or junior players,
right?
That you're watching. But it was the NHL back in the 80s.
Yeah, the natural progression of sport.
Yeah. You got to be dialed in on it. There's no doubt about that.
So Jared, tell me what you do better now that you wish you had back then. What do you do now better in your life and business that you kind of wish you knew back then?
That's that old adage. People don't really rise to the challenge. They fall to their level of their standards. Right. And those standards are usually supported by certain systems. So what processes do you have in place that are your default mode? And now what I do really well is I have a certain process for how I start my day, and it affects how I run my business, how I interact with my family. It's all part of the process. So I don't have to do a lot of thinking on it. Right. And it actually allows me a certain amount of energy to go into each day, and everything is energy. So back when you're, training for hockey, there was no real set program. Although as you're in the hockey season, by default, you end up getting a really good program in place because you have practice at a certain time and you have this schedule, and you have these habits that are going to serve you and the structure that's going to serve you. But in the off season, that wasn't the case, and it's not the case for a lot of people, whether it's players, that are trying to do something with their athletic career, or whether it's people in business, right? Somebody goes and starts a business. Most people don't have great habits or behaviors that actually help them generate energy and focus, and what you focus on expands, right? Most people that's where they drop the ball. They're so worried about what they want this week. And this goes for everybody. Whether you're a teenager training in sport or whether you're trying to be this business athlete, so many people are worried about what they want this week that they're not spending time thinking and working on who they want to become next year. And that's the big difference maker.
Yeah.
I believe.
So if you could go back and you could change something, you talked about like you didn't have a lot of perspective back then. Would that be the biggest change you'd make, is just having that kind of that vision?
Yeah, you almost need someone to consult you that's been there that can say, hey, listen, this is where you're at, and this is what you need to do to get here. Do you want to get here? And then work with you, setting you these milestones to get from point A to point B, right? If you wanted to, for example, a guy wants to go to the NHL. Well, what areas do we need to start working on, right? Like to go from where you're at to NHL, that's obviously a big leap, but there's certainly ways to break down and have smaller steps and milestones and things we want to achieve in order to get there. And during that process, you are now going to have that structure. You're now going to create these systems and the behaviors where things are automatic. And your buddies say, hey, let's go here. Let's do this weekend. And it's automatic. You're like, I can't. I have this going on. It's like athletes going to practice. You just go to practice. Like even when you got a, you got a broken thumb or whatever, that you're injured, I still went to practice.
Yeah.
Even though I wasn't on the ice. It's just, that's when you have practice and you fall to the level of those standards, and those are the standards that you have. So if you break down these larger goals into these little chunks, people are going to have the structure in place and therefore create those standards and those behaviors that are just on autopilot. At that point, all those efforts start to compound. So that's what I would have done differently is had someone help me understand where things are currently at, have that serious conversation around where you really want to go. It doesn't have to be the NHL. Hockey and sport can serve you in so many other ways, which whether it's university or whether it's your network you want to expand and your brand and business, like you can use it for all of that stuff. But if you don't have a plan for it, none of it gets used, right? Then you're just career's done and you're busy reacting because you didn't put a plan in place.
Right. Yeah. That's that structure and those habits are really what create the commitment to a higher level.
Yeah. And thankfully sport in general creates a lot of that I don't know if all athletes really appreciate that structure and that discipline that's been created for them. But that's usually why you'll see athletes do, not all, but obviously there's a good chunk of them that do fairly well career-wise after that. And it's a lot of it has to do with that structure.
What the skills they've built. So tell me, what's the difference between Jarret? Because I know you've done a bit of coaching. You've coached your son's team as well. What's the difference between Jarret, the coach and Jarret, the player?
The difference between, that's an interesting question.
I've seen you on the ice. You get pretty fiery.
Yeah. What's the difference? I'm trying to, how do I say this in a nice way? I don't, playing the game, is when you're always in it, you're always in the execution mode. Right. But I think the coaching of the game actually provides that perspective that I was missing before. So I think the coach is a lot smarter than the player. Right. The coaching version of me is a lot smarter and breaking things down to the technical aspects of it. It's way easier to identify gaps in the game when you're coaching, whereas when you're in it, and I was always in it. And again, back to that perspective, I needed someone to kind of pull me out of it. And obviously that's what coaches try and do along the way. But coaching Jaret's a lot smarter.
A lot smarter. I like that.
I ended up with a 5-game suspension this year. I'm playing beer leagues. Like it's nothing serious. And I just in it and just something, rubbed me the wrong way. And just when you're in it, you're not thinking all that clearly. So there's those knee-jerk reactions.
5-game suspension in beer league.
It's a bit of it shouldn't have been that much. These are things that you would maybe get a little scrap, little scuffle. You might get double minor or 5 minutes for fighting back in the day, but now things changed. My league changes, but that's just a really good indication of, the execution version of the individual and the person, which is great. You still got to execute, but then there's you also need the chess master. You need the coach to be able to look at it from a certain perspective. And I think that's certainly bled over into aspects of life and business as well, which has been helpful.
So getting into business, you've obviously become a very successful business entrepreneur. Did you always know you were headed for entrepreneurship? Like playing hockey was like, well, after sport, I'm gonna do something of my own, or I want to own my own business, or
no, not really. What came from sport is the fact that I wanted to challenge myself. I wanted to continually get better. And I wanted a chance to be the best, right? Whether that, and that means probably means I can't have a boss telling me that you are going to get paid $85,000 a year, right? And then next year we can revisit this. And then I got to negotiate with this guy around, hey, I'm worth $95,000, right? So sport instilled in like instinctually in you that I don't want to be capped, right? So I think that, and then entrepreneurship was really the only vehicle that would be able to serve those instincts. From my, I'm sure there's other stuff out there, sure, but from my perspective, that's why business had to happen. Is the instincts that were instilled through sport, for sure.
So you've been in the financial industry for a little over, a decade-ish, and
Yep.
before that, I know you owned a construction company. That's a big jump from construction to finance. How did that kind of transition occur? And was it even that big of a transition for you? Because you'd already kind of built the entrepreneurship kind of fundamentals skill set.
Yeah, depends how you look at business. Obviously, very different industries. There's different players on the board for sure. But if you look at the business as a model to distribute some level of product or some level of service, then it's just a matter of how can you best fine tune your business to deliver that product or service. So all businesses are in that largely, I mean, in that distribution game. So in this construction world, we had to make sure, obviously, people know about your product, why we're better, how we differentiate ourselves, and then be able to deliver on that. So the fundamentals were very much the same. So from a business perspective, then you just had to ask yourself the question, okay, if I'm going to be doing this, how do I make sure that I can max out my time and my energy? Well, then you want to be able to look at scalability, right? How is my energy going towards scaling my business versus how is my energy going towards maintaining or putting out fires? Most entrepreneurs never end up really running a business. And even my construction business I was a firefighter for a lot of it, right? And I look at scalability in that space. It's capital heavy, right? Because you need employees and you have a lot of overhead when it comes to equipment. So scalability was financially daunting. And the environment itself, I didn't necessarily want to spend all of my time working with guys who were construction. Good guys, salt of the earth, but when it comes to surrounding yourself with people that are better than you in some way, shape, or form, none of them were making more money. None of them were healthier or better relationships or had a greater vision than I did. So I was only going to grow so much, right? And then you got to bring it outside, help and networking, and which is another whole dimension, which keeps you even busier than running your own business, which is busy enough. So business-wise, for me to make the transition, it was taking a step back and creating awareness around business. And this is where I felt like I dropped the ball in my sporting life. And that's why I think it was important for me to take a look at other businesses, other business models, how they were set up. What's the risk? What's the scalability? What's the demand? What's the capital? What's the liability that I'm putting out there? And if I can find something in all these different areas that's better, well, I don't care what industry it's in. It just makes sense to change. If my goal is to build a business, then the next question is, well, why are we building this business? What is the end game? Well, I want to be able to perform on my best. Well, how are you comparing? Who are you comparing yourself to? And some businesses have a very competitive environment. It's more transparent. You can see how other people are performing. My construction business, I was making the most money in the business. These other businesses, I didn't know what their books looked like. So it wasn't like I was competing with them. So I was just kind of winning my own game. And you're a golfer, it's a little bit different. I think you're a bit more of a solo sport. Whereas I got a weak mental game. I want to be surrounded with other people that can support me. That's why I like the team sports. My golf game, right? That just doesn't quite jive. So that's why I made that transition. It was logical.
Right.
If I can find something with way greater demand, if I can find something that has the ability to pay me residual income, if I can scale my business without taking on a ton of financial risk, if any financial risk, and it just made more and more sense. Right.
So those are some pretty powerful terms, talking about scalability, talking about profitability. I learned the hard way, through business ownership and owning a franchise and multiple other small businesses. Where did you learn those skills? Like, where did you learn to start understanding, okay, I need to, it has to be scalable. It has to be, some type of a duplication. I have to be around higher level thinking people. I have to, like, where did you start learning those skills? Was it just...
I wish I could say it was through my 4-year degree at university, my Bachelor of Commerce, right?
No,
I wish
chance.
it would make sense if I did say that, but it's not the case, right? My university degree provided, I don't want to say none of that you just mentioned, but I think it was none of that. I just got exposure to other entrepreneurs.
Got around good people.
That was it. I just got a taste of what other people were doing. Again, taking a step back and looking around. If there's somebody that's, younger than you, making more money, having more fun, having more time on their hands, you might want to check your ego and figure out what they're doing. Right.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what had to happen. It took a while because my ego was, like anybody, you don't want to be told you're doing it wrong, but there's a lot of people in positions that they're just, and even if they're hard workers, like I was, you're not in the right vehicle. You're just not. No matter how hard you work, that's probably not the right vehicle for you. If your net worth hasn't grown, if your income hasn't grown, if your level of enjoyment and fulfillment hasn't grown over the last several years, you are in the wrong vehicle. Now you just have to be able to bite the bullet and make the change. And don't make that change until you've seen some options. And that's what happened to me. I ended up getting exposure to some guys that were younger and happier and making more money and had a more scalable business. And I just started to dig into that a little bit. They give me some suggestions around whether it's books to read early on. That's a passive way of getting some exposure to entrepreneurship. You see, just because I ran a business and had a degree, thought you kind of know everything or know enough, right, to just continue on. And you might, but nothing's really going to change. Again, back to the athlete instinct. I wanted to challenge myself. I wanted to be able to grow. Even though some days you're like, enough challenges, I'm done. I don't want any more challenges. You got to run towards that pain, right? That's where all the growth lies. And think about it. You got to go and accomplish something that's challenging in order to feel good about yourself. Once you feel good about yourself, you've increased your self-worth and you're only going to get paid what you think you're worth. So by keeping the same job, right, by maintaining the same net worth, by keeping your health or whatever it is at the level it's at, you, by definition, you're not challenging yourself, you're not growing, therefore you're not feeling any better. Your self-worth is not on the rise, therefore your income's never going to be on the rise, and you've locked in exactly where you are. Congratulations, welcome to the next 20 years of your life, and that's it. That freaks me out. To think that next year is going to be the same as last year. Right. Not to say we haven't had flat years, but it freaks me out. And that emotion that creates the action, right? You got to be a little bit worried. You got to be a little bit anxious, a little bit very disappointed with where you're at. Otherwise you'll just stay where you're at. Yeah. The natural mindset of an athlete is what's next. Great. I won one championship. What's next? I played in the BCHL. Okay. What's next? Now I want to play in the next league. It's like Tim Grover, right? Winning doesn't care. Yeah. Right. Okay, so man, you touched on something there. I kind of want to, like, in a digital era that we're growing up and the next generation is coming up in, how important you talked about getting around other entrepreneurs, other business owners. And today's default information highway is Google, going online. How important is it to actually get around mentors or other entrepreneurs that are actually doing it compared to just reading it? That's interesting because the amount of information that's out there now is ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
If you curated your Instagram or your Twitter feed, that could be your podcast that you're listening to. That is your online business coach in a lot of ways. So the digital world, it's as long as your attention's going into the right space, and that's difficult because we've all picked up our phone, and I go to send a message to my assistant or something like that. I pick up my phone and something else pops up, and all the next thing you know, I'm doom scrolling cats with cucumbers. Look it up. It's hilarious, but that's just, you go down this rabbit hole. So the information, if you're disciplined and like I said, curate your own feeds, it can be extremely powerful, and you can go a long way without having some additional exposure. But I don't think there's anything that can replace that interaction with someone doing better than you are.
Mm-hmm.
Right. To go out and seek and find that. We're very fortunate in our industry. We are, that's all over the place. You want to find someone who's done it twice as fast, twice as big, and they'll tell you how to do it. We have those resources available, which is a godsend. And I don't think we really, as I'm saying it, I don't think we realize how valuable that happens to be to help your game. So other entrepreneurs, they're in a tough spot. They got to go reach out and find it. But there are definitely groups out there that can create that exposure for you. And you're never going to put a price on that, is to go and seek somebody out that you think that you can relate to, but it intimidates you a little bit. That's probably the right person for you. Most people don't
someone that makes you uncomfortable.
Yeah. And most people don't do it because it is uncomfortable having those conversations with those people, because they're the ones that are there to point out your flaws, and that never feels good. So we don't do it. But yeah, critical to move forward.
So being in the financial industry, and entrepreneurship, you understand kind of most people don't know that their identity is tied to their income. And you didn't make a lot of money playing hockey, but you have in business.
Rubbing that in.
Yeah. We're live. I can't even edit it out. I'm sorry. But you have in business, and you continue to hit milestones and thresholds. And talk about, like, how did that happen? Was there mental work you had to do, visualization work? Like, that's a big step to grow your identity and your income as much as you have from playing in the WHL.
Yeah, I think if you end up doing the work for a long enough period of time, you're going to start to feel that you're worth it. And as soon as you feel that you're worth it, you'll start to earn it. But the mindset behind being able to grow the income, I look at it this way. If I know what I'm doing is right, if I know it's powerful, I know it's important, I know people are going to see value in it, I'm doing the best I can. The longer I can go without getting paid for those services, the more I'm going to get paid. The larger the plane, the larger the runway type of mentality. So I just kind of stuck by my guns. If the money's not there and you are, by all accounts, doing the right thing, getting perspective on making sure you're doing the right thing, then we don't have to worry too much about the money. I'm not saying just go and find something that you love and you don't have to have work another day in your life. I'm not necessarily a fan of that, but I am a believer of finding something that you want to get good at, get really good at it, and you'll start to enjoy being good at something. And if you are in the right industry, like the financial industry, for example, there's a huge demand, and doing right things for people, that's going to pay off. I just had the unwavering belief, along with a lot of examples of what that looks like for those that have kind of come before me. Right. So from an entrepreneur's perspective, it's great to have a lot of live examples for you that you can bounce ideas off of. So that's super helpful. But at the end of the day, you believe it, you get good at it. It's eventually it's gonna happen. They say that your level of success depends on the level of uncertainty you can handle. So if you have no income coming in for a while, and you're doing good work, the longer you can handle that, the more income that's going to be coming your way.
as long as you're in the right vehicle platform.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The hardest thing to do is break the 4-minute mile before it's ever been done. Right. But then once it's done, and then it's a lot easier for everyone else to do it. And I think, I mean, there's still examples out there, but it's very difficult to find anything that you want to do that someone hasn't done already.
And that's the great news in our space, in the financial space that we're in, that there's enough people, enough Roger Bannister, he broke the 400
Yeah.
miles.
Roger Bannister. Yeah.
There's enough of those guys that have done that, that it really opens the door, creates that space for you to go and do it. Because there's, guys that, how do you make $1 million in a couple of years, like in cash flow? Well, talk to those who have done it in this industry, right? It's out. So it makes it a little bit easier for us to have that belief, because that's missing for a lot of people, a lot of entrepreneurs. They're kind of wondering, right? They look at the news, they look at government shutting businesses down, unbelievable that kind of stuff happens. And then you start to get a little bit worried, right? And then all of a sudden you're playing scared. And if you don't make that decision and go after it, even if it's not the right decision, you're better off making it and doing it than hesitating.
Yeah.
I know in hockey, you hesitate for that half a second, you're going to look dumb.
You can get an ankle breaker.
Yeah.
So here's a loaded question, Jared. What's easier, pro sport or pro business?
I hope that's so loaded question. I don't know. I would pro sport or pro business. I would say pro business would be easier. Pro sport, you're professional in one domain. And your skills are going to be, they can only be focused in that one space. Right? You're not going to see a high level hockey player that's also a high level baseball player. Right? It doesn't cross over.
Yeah.
Right? Very specialized. But when you get into business, using some of those same instincts and structure, and business is all about, for the most part, it's all about distribution, right? The distribution of the product or the services. Now you can take that same game, that level of that mindset, that level of focus, the belief, the energy, and you can apply it to different businesses, or even different niches within one business. You look at the financial industry, it's a huge industry. You can specialize in so many different areas, and that allows you some of that diversification, or focusing on things that are more interesting to you. If it's more interesting, you'll get better at it. You get better at it, you start to enjoy your work because you're good at something. Everybody likes to be good at something, and that's when things start to come to you. So yeah, pro business would be easier because you have more options.
More options, and you have a bigger window.
Yeah.
You're not turning pro in the NHL at 45.
That's right. To win the Memorial Cup, they got that. What, you get like 4 years?
Yeah.
Over. You can never win it. Right.
Yeah. It'd be pretty tough to build an empire in business in a 3-4 year window.
Yeah.
And I think that's what most people don't realize, like how short a professional sport career is. And it's that window shuts very quickly.
And in professional sport, unless you get an ongoing shoe deal or something like that, which is very rare, there's no passive income. Once your game's done, you have your name. Maybe you can monetize that to some degree, but there's no passive income that comes into play after. Yeah. It's all active. You're exchanging your time for that income. You're not getting the time back, and hopefully you do something smart with the income, and because it's over.
Yeah.
After the 3 years or the 6 years or whatever the window happens to be. Yeah.
So shifting gears a little bit here with your son Connor. He comes to you. He says, "Dad, I want to play for the Edmonton Oilers." Actually, we can't say that. We're here in Calgary. He wants to play professional hockey. What do you tell him, man? How do you build them, knowing the commitment, knowing the sacrifice, and then on top of that, knowing that the chances of playing in the NHL are so slim?
Instead of telling him what it takes, I started asking the question, like, what do you think you'll need to do? I get him to come up with the ideas.
Empowering him.
Way easier to get him to buy into shooting pucks in the garage because it was his idea. Right. So it's inevitable that, yeah, you're going to have to do a lot of that. Your summers are going to have to look a little bit different than what they have in the past, sort of thing. But especially for a dad to tell him, it doesn't work. It doesn't work very well. Right. So that would be the, step one, asking him, and then whatever his answer is his answer. You build off of that. Right. And then, day by day, and I do this with the kids in their schoolwork. I'm trying to not necessarily ask them, hey, how did the day go? What did you learn at school? I'm asking the questions like, hey, what did you enjoy most about practice today? Right.
Yeah.
What was the best relationship? Because our season just wrapped up. Who's your best buddy from the team this year? Who do you like hanging around the most? And it just gets them engaged and their level of energy, and they start leaning into the conversation. And then it's easy to take that conversation to like, hey, what team do you want to play on next year? Right? Maybe it's the same team of their buddy. So be it. Right? What team is he going to make? Oh, he's going to move up for sure, Dad. He's going to move up. He's so good. I'm like, okay. What do you think you're going to have to do to kind of stay with him? Well, let's go right now. Let's go shoot somebody, right? And it's just super, super engaging for people. Whereas back when my dad really didn't say anything about telling me to do or asking me questions. He was kind of a very hands-off, which in a lot of ways I appreciate, because the decisions that I made were largely, they're mine. I owned them, but there was no prompts, right? There's no little lighthouses along the way for me. And that's what I want to do for anybody that wants to play professional sport, is to be that little light down the road, right? And then they get there and then they can see another light, which are just simply the prompts or the questions or the engaging moments where you can create that energy around the idea.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a real positive conversation. Like, it turns it into a positive conversation and positive empowerment for sure.
Instead of focusing on how hard it is.
Yeah.
Because right away you say, hey, son, only 0.02% of the population ever, like, what's he thinking right off the bat? That doesn't make it. Like, it's hard work. You got to do. Now you're using work and you're using hard and using few people can make it. How excited is he? He's a young kid. Like, what are we putting in their mind? Yeah. Granted, statistically, he's not going to make it, but this way, at least he puts his best effort forward.
Yeah.
What else are you asking for?
Yeah.
Right? From a coach or from a parent, right? And that's the focus.
Totally. Okay, Jared, I want to wrap up here, but I want to kind of tap your brain a little bit. So getting to the level you have in business, getting to the level even you did in hockey, requires like you have a big vision. That's one of the things I admire about you is having a big vision. What's allowed you talk about your daily routines, you talk about kind of those habits. Is there something you do on a daily basis to grow that vision, or what's allows you, kind of give us some tangibles on what allows you to have that bigger vision where, you know what, I don't want to just play in the BCHL. I want to actually make a run at playing in the NHL, or I don't want to just be a simple business owner. I want to own an empire.
So the vision and the ability to execute towards it is always that ultimate challenge, I think, for entrepreneurs. So on my end of things, it is the thought or the idea that I don't have a lot of time. None of us really do. I don't care how old you are. You just don't have a lot of time. Yeah. And that is the one thing that we are not making any more of is time. So that part, I don't want to say freaks me out, but the idea behind it is eventually this thing's going to wrap up. We don't necessarily know when that is. So that always makes me appreciate the moment and understand that, well, to make the best of where I'm at, I want to accomplish the most, which means I need to take on the most challenging task. And I actually, I have these Stoic coins that talk about amor fati, which is the love of the challenge, essentially, even the pain along the way. And there's another quote by Marcus Aurelius. He's like, remember that you're going to die, paraphrasing, and now go out today with that understanding. You kind of leave it all on the table a little bit. I think operate a little bit more kindness. a little bit more urgency, but also appreciation at the same time. So I kind of adopt that mentality when I'm going out and thinking about where I want to go, and being able to execute on it. I think a lot of people, I want this house and I want this vacation and I want this money saved up. We all want that.
Yeah.
But we don't act on it.
Right.
And that's because I don't think we focus on, I don't want to say the negative. I want to say focus on the inevitable, that we're eventually going to run out of time for these things. And if you don't go and attack this stuff, no one's going to give it to you. And so I'm always like daily spend a little bit of time on my vision and how I'm executing on it. Right. And what happens if I don't? Which there's this whole school of thought out there, like all this positive thinking, and I get it. Like I totally understand you want to focus on the positive side of things, but it's the negative side that really drives action. Right. So I got an example of like a zebra in the Serengeti. There's a bunch of them, so he's probably not going to get eaten by the lion over there. So they're just chewing on their grass. But the thought that they might allows them to stay alert. Right? And you have to take the idea, the thought, to action. And how do you take something from your mind to your body is you need to think about the consequences if you don't. So the zebra is always thinking, I'm like, hey, I might need to take some action. And that's when the adrenaline pumps in, and that's when they can actually run. And they're not thinking about anything else but that action. In business, I kind of feel the same way. Like I want all these wonderful things, but at the same time, if I don't take action, I'm going to be embarrassed by my lack of results. I'm going to start creating, maybe resentments towards people that haven't been supporting me because I'm not taking action.
Right.
So I think of these negative consequences that if I don't take action, and these are the things that actually move me to action. That whole idea that people are going to move away from things they don't want with greater velocity than they will move towards things that they do want.
Yeah.
I built that into my goal planning, which some of it like literally says it might have some negative connotation to it, but that's the stuff that makes me want to make sure I'm doing something with my day.
Yeah. I like that. It's gotta drive you. It's gotta really create urgency. Wicked, man. This is awesome. So just shout out, like if people want to follow you, reach out to you, pick your brain more, where's the best place to follow your journey?
Probably on Instagram would be a central hub for me. LinkedIn, I'm on that as well. I believe my contact information's on there for people. As if I'm not checking those messages as often as I probably should, but those are great resources for sure.
Love it. Okay, Jared, appreciate your time today, man. We'll I'll close our live and then we'll wrap up here.